What was supposed to be another predictable episode of The View quickly spiraled into something no one expected. Whoopi Goldberg, a veteran host known for controlling the conversation and shutting down opposing views, thought she could do the same to Karoline Leavitt, a rising conservative voice. But this time, the usual formula didn't work. Instead of being caught off guard, Karoline flipped the script, and by the end of the segment, it was Whoopi, not Karoline, who was on the defensive. The discussion topic, misinformation in politics and media bias, was carefully chosen. From the moment Karoline was introduced, it was clear she was walking into an ambush. Whoopi wasted no time, launching straight into an accusation. Conservative media has been spreading a lot of misinformation. How do you defend that? The audience chuckled, sensing an easy takedown. But Karoline didn't flinch. She met Whoopi's gaze with calm confidence and responded, "Who gets to decide what misinformation is? Because from what I've seen, networks like yours have been wrong plenty of times." The shift in energy was immediate. The audience murmured, some co-hosts exchanged uneasy glances, and even Whoopi hesitated for a brief moment. Karoline had turned the tables effortlessly, refusing to play defense. Instead of scrambling to justify conservative media, she called out The View's own track record of misinformation, exposing the hypocrisy of the very people trying to discredit her. Whoopi, visibly irritated, tried to regain control, her tone growing sharper, more condescending. But the more she pushed, the more Karoline held her ground, responding with sharp, precise arguments. For the first time in years, Whoopi Goldberg wasn't the one in control of the conversation, and she knew it. The tension in the room was thick, the audience no longer as predictably on Whoopi's side. What started as a routine debate had now become something much bigger. Karoline had done the unthinkable. She had shifted the power dynamic on live television, and Whoopi Goldberg was left struggling to keep up. From the moment the segment began, it was clear that Whoopi Goldberg had a plan. As a seasoned host of The View, she was no stranger to controlling the narrative, steering discussions, and shutting down conservative viewpoints with dismissive remarks and condescending laughter. She had done it countless times before, interrupting, talking over, and ridiculing guests who didn't align with the show's ideological stance. And today, she intended to do the same to Karoline Leavitt. The topic of discussion was misinformation in politics and media bias, a carefully chosen subject that allowed Whoopi and her co-hosts to frame conservatives as the main culprits of spreading falsehoods. From the very start, Whoopi wasted no time setting the trap. With an air of smug certainty, she leaned forward and asked, "Let's be real here, Karoline. Conservative media has been spreading a lot of misinformation. How do you defend that?" It was a classic move, broad accusation, no specifics, designed to put Karoline on the defensive before she even had a chance to speak. The audience, primed to agree, chuckled. Whoopi expected Karoline to stumble, to fumble through a response that she could easily pick apart. But that's not what happened. Karoline remained poised, her expression unreadable. She didn't scramble for an excuse or fall into the trap of defending conservative media as a whole. Instead, she turned the question around. Who gets to decide what misinformation is? Because from what I've seen, networks like yours have been wrong plenty of times. The shift in the room was instant. The murmurs started. A few co-hosts exchanged uneasy glances, and even Whoopi's smile faltered just slightly. This was not the response she had expected. Still, Whoopi wasn't about to give up control. She leaned in, her voice sharpening. "Oh, please. We fact-check everything on this show. We don't spread misinformation." Karoline tilted her head slightly, a knowing look in her eyes. "Really? You don't? Well, I can think of a few examples where that's not exactly true." That was it. In that moment, Whoopi Goldberg realized she had made a mistake. Instead of walking into a debate where she dictated the terms, she was now playing defense. The power dynamic had flipped, and Karoline was the one steering the conversation. Whoopi Goldberg had underestimated her guest. And for the first time in years, she was about to learn what it felt like to lose control of The View, live, on air. From the moment Whoopi Goldberg attempted to frame the discussion, Karoline Leavitt knew exactly what was happening. She had walked into The View's studio fully prepared, knowing that the panelists would try to corner her with broad accusations and emotionally charged rhetoric. But unlike so many conservative guests before her, Karoline wasn't here to play defense. She was here to take control. As Whoopi insisted, "Oh please, we fact-check everything on this show. We don't spread misinformation." Karoline simply tilted her head, offering a knowing smile. "Really? You don't? Well, I can think of a few examples where that's not exactly true." The audience murmured. A few panelists shifted in their seats. The confident smirk on Whoopi's face faltered, if only for a second. Karoline's response wasn't defensive. It was assertive, direct, And most importantly, it forced Whoopi to justify her own credibility. Whoopi, not used to being challenged in this way, attempted to laugh it off. "Oh, come on, Karoline. Don't act like conservative media hasn't been caught spreading outright lies. We're here to talk about facts, not conspiracy theories." It was an attempt to regain control, to discredit Karoline before she could continue. But Karoline wasn't rattled. She let Whoopi finish, nodded, and then delivered a response that changed the entire energy of the room. "You talk about conservatives playing the victim, but tell me, Whoopi, when was the last time a conservative voice sat at this table and was allowed to finish a full sentence without being interrupted, mocked, or labeled dangerous?" Silence. Even some of the co-hosts looked uncomfortable. They knew she had a point. Whoopi rolled her eyes, attempting to wave her hand dismissively. "Oh, please, we've had conservatives on this show plenty of times." But Karoline wasn't about to let that slide. "And how does that usually go?" she pressed, leaning forward slightly. "Do you actually let them speak, or do you talk over them, ridicule them, and call their views harmful while the audience cheers?" At this, the audience reaction changed. There was no immediate applause, no laughter in support of Whoopi's usual tactics. Instead, a low murmur of recognition rippled through the room. Even the viewers at home could see the truth. Karoline wasn't just challenging Whoopi, she was exposing her. Whoopi tried to respond, but Karoline cut in smoothly. "You talk about tolerance, Whoopi, but tolerance means allowing different opinions to be heard, not just the ones you agree with." The control of the debate had officially shifted. Whoopi Goldberg was no longer in charge. Karoline had taken the reins, and the audience knew it. The tension in the studio was palpable. Karoline Leavitt had done something that no one had managed on The View in years. She had taken control of the conversation and forced Whoopi Goldberg onto the defensive. The usual formula of overwhelming a conservative guest with interruptions, loaded questions, and audience cheer cues wasn't working. The panelists could feel it. The audience could feel it. And most importantly, Whoopi Goldberg could feel it. As Karoline dismantled Whoopi's attempts to frame conservatives as victims while simultaneously proving that the show itself never allowed true debate, Whoopi's frustration became evident. She tried her usual dismissive tactics, rolling her eyes, waving her hand, and laughing off Karoline's points. But Karoline remained steady. Unshaken. She wasn't just answering questions, she was exposing the show's hypocrisy in real time. That's when Whoopi made a crucial mistake. With visible irritation, she leaned in, her voice sharper than before. "Oh, sweetheart, you're sitting at this table right now, aren't you? So clearly, we let other voices in. You conservatives just don't like being called out when you're wrong." The audience laughed hesitantly, sensing that Whoopi was trying to reassert her dominance. But Karoline wasn't backing down. She tilted her head slightly, studying Whoopi's face with an expression that was both calm and calculated. Then, with absolute precision, she delivered the line that broke Whoopi's composure completely. "Called out? No, Whoopi. What conservatives don't like is being shouted down, talked over, and labeled as dangerous just for having an opinion that doesn't align with yours." The crowd reaction was immediate. The laughter died. A few quiet murmurs rippled through the audience. Even the co-hosts, who were usually quick to jump in and support Whoopi, hesitated. Whoopi's expression shifted. Her jaw tightened. Her fingers tapped against the table. She was losing control, and she knew it. "You sit here, episode after episode, calling for tolerance, preaching about free speech," Karoline continued, her voice razor-sharp yet steady. "But the second someone challenges you, you don't debate. You attack, you mock, and when that doesn't work, you try to shut them up completely." The final sentence hit like a wrecking ball. Whoopi opened her mouth, but for the first time in years, she had nothing to say. The silence stretched on, unbearably heavy. Then, Whoopi let out a sharp exhale, shaking her head with a forced laugh. "Oh, I'm done with this nonsense." She yanked off her microphone, tossed it onto the table, and shoved her chair back. The producers panicked. The co-host looked frozen. The camera angle shifted awkwardly, unsure whether to follow her or stay on Karoline. The studio was dead silent except for the sound of Whoopi's chair scraping against the floor. Whoopi Goldberg, the longtime face of The View, had just stormed off her own show. Karoline? She simply folded her hands, leaned back slightly and smirked. She didn't need to say a word. Because in that moment, she had already won. The moment Whoopi Goldberg stormed off the set, The View was no longer in control of the conversation. The usual scripted segments, the audience cues, and the well-rehearsed narratives had all been shattered. And yet, Karoline Leavitt remained perfectly composed. She didn't celebrate. She didn't smirk arrogantly. Instead, she simply adjusted her microphone, folded her hands, and let the silence hang in the air. The studio was frozen. The producers were scrambling behind the scenes, uncertain whether to cut to commercial or let the chaos play out. The co-hosts sat stiffly, exchanging nervous glances, while the audience, usually so quick to cheer for Whoopi, remained uncertain, their loyalties shaken. Then, Karoline struck the final blow. She let the tension linger for a moment before leaning slightly forward, her voice calm yet devastatingly sharp. "I think what you meant to say, Whoopi, is that you don't debate people you can't control." Boom. The room erupted, not in the usual coordinated applause, but in gasps, murmurs, and stunned silence. This wasn't just another debate moment. This was a reckoning. Whoopi, the veteran host, had built a career on controlling conversations, on ensuring that guests, especially conservatives, never gained the upper hand. But in that instant, Karoline had flipped the entire script. She had exposed the game for what it was. The power dynamics had shifted entirely. The remaining co-hosts sat frozen, their expressions betraying the realization that this wasn't just another heated exchange. This was a defining moment. Joy Behar, usually quick to jump in with a sarcastic remark, opened her mouth but hesitated. Sunny Hostin, always prepared with a legalistic rebuttal, looked down at her notes as if searching for a lifeline. But there was nothing left to say. Karoline let the weight of her words settle before delivering one last, merciless truth. Maybe that's why fewer and fewer people take this show seriously anymore. It was brutal, it was undeniable, and it was irrefutable. Even some in the audience, longtime viewers of The View, couldn't help but react. A few clapped. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others simply sat there, processing what had just happened. Whoopi had walked off in frustration, assuming she would regain control later. But by leaving the stage, she had handed the victory to Karoline. And Karoline didn't even need to press the advantage. She simply let the truth speak for itself. The segment ended abruptly, the producers cutting to an unscheduled commercial break. But the damage was done. By the time The View returned from commercial, Whoopi was gone. And Karoline, she was still there. Calm. Unshaken. And in that moment, everyone watching, inside the studio and across the country, knew exactly who had won. It was supposed to be just another heated debate on The View, another moment where the panel would dominate, control the conversation, and steer it in their preferred direction. But this time, something was different. Whoopi Goldberg, seasoned, confident and used to shutting down opposing voices, had met her match in Karoline Leavitt. As the discussion escalated, it became clear that Whoopi's usual tactics weren't working. Karoline wasn't getting flustered. She wasn't backing down. She wasn't playing into the script that The View had perfected over the years. Instead, she was calmly, methodically exposing the hypocrisy of the show, turning Whoopi's own arguments against her. Then came the breaking point. Whoopi, visibly irritated, leaned forward, her voice dripping with condescension. "Oh, sweetheart, you're sitting at this table right now, aren't you? So clearly, we let other voices in? You conservatives just don't like being called out when you're wrong." The audience gave a few nervous chuckles, sensing that Whoopi believed she had regained the upper hand. But Karoline was waiting. She tilted her head slightly, studying Whoopi's face with a poised, calculating expression. Then, with perfect timing, she responded, her voice cool and sharp. "Called out? No, Whoopi. What conservatives don't like is being shouted down, talked over, and labeled as dangerous just for having an opinion that doesn't align with yours." Silence. The audience, usually quick to cheer for Whoopi and the panelists, hesitated. Even the co-hosts, normally eager to jump in, sat stiffly in their seats. Whoopi's face hardened. Her fingers tapped against the table. She had lost control of the conversation, and she knew it. The moment Whoopi Goldberg stormed off the set of The View, the internet went into a frenzy. Within seconds, clips of the incident flooded social media. Viewers who had missed the live broadcast rushed to their screens, eager to witness what had just unfolded. But what shocked people most wasn't just Whoopi's dramatic exit, it was Karoline Leavitt's unshaken composure in the face of hostility. Twitter exploded. Hashtags like, "Biaba Whoopi meltdown," "Biaba Karoline owns The View," and "Whoopi walks off" began trending worldwide. Conservative commentators immediately pounced on the moment, calling it a perfect example of how the mainstream media crumbles when confronted with actual debate. Memes surfaced within minutes. Whoopi's stunned face, the moment she pulled off her mic, and her abrupt exit were turned into captions like, "When you start a debate but realize you're losing and need an escape plan." Whoopi, conservatives don't debate. Also Whoopi, runs away mid-conversation. Facts don't care about your feelings, so you storm off instead. It wasn't just conservative media celebrating the moment, even those who normally supported The View couldn't deny the optics were terrible. The show had spent years branding itself as a place of tough conversations, yet here was Whoopi, walking away the moment she was challenged by someone who refused to be intimidated. Within an hour, news outlets from both sides of the political spectrum covered the moment. Fox News ran with the headline, "Whoopi Goldberg walks off after losing control of The View, Karoline Leavitt calls out hypocrisy." Meanwhile, CNN and MSNBC scrambled to defend Whoopi, labeling the moment as a necessary stand against misinformation, and claiming she refused to engage in bad faith arguments. But those explanations fell flat. The raw footage didn't lie, and millions of people had already seen it play out in real time. Late-night talk shows couldn't resist poking fun either. Jimmy Fallon joked, "I haven't seen someone storm out that fast since my ex found out I still had Tinder." TikTok comedians reenacted the meltdown, mimicking Whoopi's mic pull and dramatic exit. Even Hollywood figures chimed in. One former View co-host tweeted, "Finally, someone who didn't back down to Whoopi." But the biggest viral moment of all? Karoline's response. She didn't go on a rant. She didn't need to make a long statement. She simply retweeted the clip with 5 words that destroyed any defense Whoopi had left. "I thought this was a debate." Boom. The internet exploded again. The simplicity of the statement made it even more devastating. No rant, no insults. Just pure, unshakable confidence. By the end of the day, the clip had over 25 million views. By the end of the week, it was officially one of the most watched talk show moments in years. Network executives at ABC were reportedly furious, as higher-ups expressed disappointment in how Whoopi handled the situation. Sponsors grew nervous, and damage control mode was activated. But it was too late. The truth was out there. The View's carefully curated illusion of tolerance and open debate had just collapsed on live television, and the internet would never let Whoopi forget it. The media's response to Whoopi Goldberg's dramatic exit from The View was swift and calculated. As the viral clip continued to spread like wildfire, mainstream networks scrambled to regain control of the narrative. ABC, the network behind The View, released a carefully worded statement attempting to downplay the controversy, emphasizing their commitment to spirited yet respectful discussions. However, the damage was already done. Social media had already framed Whoopi's exit as an act of cowardice rather than principle, and no amount of corporate spin could erase what millions had seen with their own eyes. Left-leaning media outlets quickly came to Whoopi's defense, with CNN calling the situation a manufactured controversy, and MSNBC insisting that she had taken a stand against misinformation. The Washington Post even ran an op-ed blaming Karoline Leavitt for provoking an emotional response rather than engaging in meaningful discourse. However, these narratives faced a major problem: raw footage. The unedited video clip was circulating across every platform, showing Whoopi visibly rattled, struggling to regain control, and ultimately storming off when she couldn't steer the conversation. No amount of media spin could rewrite that reality. Meanwhile, conservative media outlets seized the moment. Fox News, The Daily Wire, and Newsmax replayed the clip on loop, framing it as proof of The View's hypocrisy. Even late-night talk show hosts and Hollywood figures couldn't resist mocking the meltdown. Jimmy Fallon joked, "I haven't seen someone leave a set that fast since my ex found my Tinder profile." TikTok users flooded social media with reenactments of Whoopi's dramatic walk-off, and a former View co-host tweeted, "Finally, someone stood up to Whoopi, about time." Amidst the media frenzy, Karoline Leavitt delivered a single devastating response. Instead of engaging in a war of words, she simply tweeted, "I thought this was a debate." That short, calm statement reignited the viral moment, exposing Whoopi's actions for what they were. While Whoopi and the network scrambled to control the fallout, Karoline had already moved on, proving that she had not only won the debate but had also reshaped the entire conversation. The damage to The View was undeniable. Ratings took a hit, sponsors grew uneasy, and even loyal viewers admitted it was an embarrassing moment for the show. When Whoopi finally addressed the controversy on the next episode of The View, her explanation fell flat. She claimed she had walked off because she refused to entertain bad faith arguments, insisting that Karoline was there to create drama rather than have a real discussion. The audience clapped, but it was clear the moment had already slipped out of Whoopi's control. Millions had already seen the truth. No one had forced her out, no one had silenced her, she had chosen to walk away. And in an age where social media ensures that receipts never disappear, Whoopi's credibility had taken a serious blow, one she would never fully recover from. As the media storm continued to rage, Karoline Leavitt remained remarkably composed. While Whoopi Goldberg and The View scrambled to contain the fallout from her dramatic exit, Karoline didn't engage in petty back-and-forths or issue long-winded explanations. Instead, she delivered a single calculated statement that would serve as the final mic drop moment of the entire controversy. In an interview just days after the incident, Karoline sat calmly across from her host, addressing the situation with the same confidence and poise she had displayed on The View. When asked about Whoopi walking off, she simply said, "I didn't go on that show to create drama. I went there to have an actual discussion. But if the second someone challenges their narrative, they storm off. Maybe that tells you everything you need to know." That single sentence sent shockwaves through the media. It was concise, direct, and devastatingly effective. Unlike Whoopi, who had spent the past few days floundering, justifying, and insisting she had walked away for a noble reason, Karoline didn't have to explain anything. She let the facts speak for themselves. Her response instantly went viral, turning into headlines across news outlets. Karoline Leavitt shuts down The View's meltdown with one brutal line. Conservative media ran with it, praising her ability to remain unshaken under pressure. Even more surprisingly, many neutral and independent commentators admitted that she had made a valid point. Meanwhile, Whoopi's credibility continued to erode. The View's producers had already tried to sweep the incident under the rug, releasing their corporate damage control statement about spirited debate and respectful dialogue, but Karoline's mic drop moment completely undercut their narrative. People weren't buying the spin. If The View was about real discussions, why had their lead host walked off mid-debate? If Whoopi truly believed in challenging opinions, why hadn't she stayed to engage with Karoline instead of fleeing the stage? The internet had its answer, and there was no recovering from it. As the dust settled, Karoline didn't linger on the controversy. She had made her point, won the debate, and walked away victorious without needing to gloat. While The View tried to return to business as usual, the moment remained an unshakable stain on Whoopi's reputation. Memes, videos, and social media discussions ensured that the clip of her storming off would live on indefinitely. And in the end, it wasn't Whoopi, ABC, or even The View that had the last word. It was Karoline Leavitt, with a simple truth that left an undeniable mark. Maybe that tells you everything you need to know. The fallout from Whoopi Goldberg's dramatic exit on The View didn't just fade into obscurity. It left a lasting impact that reshaped the conversation around political discourse in mainstream media. The moment had been more than just a heated debate gone wrong. It became a defining example of how one-sided discussions were often protected under the guise of journalism. Karoline Leavitt's unwavering composure and sharp rebuttals exposed what many had suspected for years. That platforms like The View weren't truly about open debate but about reinforcing a particular narrative. And when that narrative was challenged too effectively, the response wasn't engagement. It was retreat. In the weeks following the viral moment, The View struggled to recover its credibility. The show had long positioned itself as a space for spirited debate, yet Whoopi's meltdown had proven otherwise. Audiences began questioning how genuine these discussions were, and ratings took a noticeable dip. Network executives reportedly held closed-door meetings about how to move forward, and whispers of a format shakeup began circulating. More conservative voices, both media personalities and everyday viewers, used the incident as ammunition to call out media bias, arguing that The View had exposed itself as an echo chamber rather than a legitimate forum for discussion. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt's profile skyrocketed. The viral exchange cemented her reputation as a formidable conservative voice, someone unafraid to challenge the establishment media. She was invited onto numerous talk shows, both political and mainstream, to discuss what had happened, but she never needed to play the victim. Instead, she simply pointed back to the clip and let it speak for itself. Her following grew exponentially, and she became a sought-after guest for debates and political panels, proving that a single moment of strength and clarity could reshape a career. Beyond individual reputations, the event had broader implications for media culture. It forced mainstream networks to reconsider how they handled opposing viewpoints. Some programs began incorporating more balanced panels, while others doubled down on their existing approach, further alienating skeptical audiences. For younger generations, especially those engaged in political discourse on social media, the incident became a case study in media bias, free speech, and what happens when those in power are challenged too effectively. Ultimately, Whoopi Goldberg may have thought she was walking away from a debate, but in reality, she was walking into a permanent stain on her credibility. Karoline Leavitt, on the other hand, had walked into history. The showdown between Karoline Leavitt and Whoopi Goldberg was more than just a viral television moment. It was a lesson in composure, conviction, and the power of standing firm in one's beliefs. It highlighted an uncomfortable truth about modern discourse. When confronted with strong, reasoned opposition, many who claim to champion open discussion would rather shut it down than engage. But in doing so, they reveal their own fragility. For those watching, especially older audiences who have seen the evolution of media and political debate over the decades, this incident serves as a powerful reminder. Real dialogue requires courage, not control. It's easy to dominate a conversation when everyone agrees with you, but true strength lies in allowing opposing voices to be heard and responding with logic, not emotion. Another crucial lesson is grace under pressure. Karoline didn't win the exchange by shouting louder or resorting to insults. She won because she remained composed, let the facts speak for themselves, and refused to be rattled by provocation. This is a principle that applies far beyond politics. Whether in personal relationships, the workplace, or community discussions, those who stay calm and collected in the face of hostility often emerge stronger. Finally, this moment reinforced a simple but profound truth. Walking away doesn't mean winning. Whoopi Goldberg's exit wasn't an act of principle, it was an act of surrender. When we disengage simply because we don't like what we're hearing, we lose an opportunity to grow, to refine our arguments, and to truly understand one another. In an era where so many conversations turn into shouting matches, this incident offers a clear takeaway. Listen, think, and stand firm, because the loudest voice isn't always the strongest one.